Hi, everyone. Alan Shields here, Chief of Police for the town, and we are 10-8 and in service, which means we're here to make people's lives better by safeguarding the lives, rights, and property of everyone we serve. Before we get going too much, if you don't mind, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, or follow our channel on Facebook, and send this out to a friend so they can watch live as well. This is a live show, so if you have a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer it live during the show. And if we're unable to answer it live, I'll find the answer and I'll throw it in the chat afterwards. A couple of quick announcements. We still have a couple more weeks before the starts of our Citizens Academy. It starts exactly 2 weeks from today. So if you are interested, there is a link in the description below on how to sign up. Just submit that application and we'll get you going on that. If you want to make Danville a safer place, we've got a local roadway safety plan and you can select your area. So you just drop a pin or select a little area where you would like to say where there's a problem, and maybe even recommend a solution on what we can do better. And we're actually going to start a series on the FEMA all hazards checklist. We've talked about this, but it's a good checklist. And what we want to do is we want to go through what we feel are going to be the most relevant parts to you here in Danville. Earlier, you'll remember back in April, May, we went through our wildfire preparedness and evacuation guide. We would also recommend that you download that. And then if you want to be alerted when some major disaster is happening, go to our community warning system. There's a link in the description. Sign in for that, and you can receive text alerts and phone calls and all that sort of thing. So however you'd like to be notified, just let us know, and we will notify you of that. We're going to go over our blotter, but I think I'm going to probably be criticized for saying we had a good week last week because this week wasn't as good. If you remember the week before, I think we only had one total part one crime, one property crime, and that was it. This week, not the same. But if you want to get updates on crime info, go to communitycrimemap.com and you can see everything that we put out. We do hold back some things like sexual assaults and crimes against children. So go ahead and check this out on communitycrimemap.com, and you can download all of the data. You can actually set up and get alerts. Just be aware that the interface has changed a little bit. So if you have trouble navigating that, let us know and we will help you through that. So you'll notice that I use the extreme small font. So I hope you're watching this on like a super iPad or some big screen TV. There was a lot of crime last week. So we had 9 thefts and 1 burglary. That is above average for us. And then we actually had no collisions to speak of except for 3 hit and run counter reports, and I'll talk about those later. So on August 22nd, we had quite a bit. We had some flags stolen from the 1800 block of Camino Ramon. And then we also had what seemed like a series of crime. We had some tools stolen from a job site on Olson Road. Later, we had a phone that was stolen from Harts Avenue. And one that we had a successful outcome. We had a watch stolen from Fitness 19. And this was where the person was working out. They had set the watch down to do a lift. When they came back to it, the watch was gone. This is to highlight a good business because that business had good cameras. We were able to quickly identify who took the watch. We reviewed the logs for the people that were there. We were able to apprehend. It was a juvenile. We were able to apprehend the juvenile, get the watch back. Everything was good. And so a lot of what we talk about on the show is crime prevention and how you can avoid being a victim, and then what you can do if you are victimized to help us capture the people that did it. So kudos to Fitness 19 for being a good local business and having cameras set up to safeguard your property. So great job on Fitness 19. On the 23rd, we had a stolen license plate from a vehicle parked on the 1700 block of Camino Ramon. And then on the 25th, we actually had 3 separate thefts of tools from vehicles. So it seems like we're getting tools stolen out of cars here in town. We had 2 of them stolen from the 200 block of Fairway Drive. That's just off Diablo Road. And then one on Constitution Drive, which is also off Diablo Road. On the 27th, we had a shoplift from Lucky's. That was a juvenile suspect that stole some alcohol. He was apprehended and the property was recovered. And then on the 28th, we had a catalytic converter theft on San Paulo Court. With the tools, I know it's really easy to leave the tools in the car and hope that they're there the next day, but that is something that we're seeing. We're seeing tools stolen from cars. In that case, we were actually pretty fortunate. Some of the homeowners had cameras and were able to get a description of the vehicle, and we were able to then take that description, bring it back to our cameras. We were able to identify the specific vehicle, and we were able to do some follow-up and actually able to locate the vehicle and the people that were driving it and all that. So we are continuing to work on that those leads. But again, kudos to our victims in this case. We don't want anyone to be victimized, but they took control of their property, and they had cameras set up so that they, when they were a victim of theft, they could say, here, I've got something for you to go on, and our detectives and our officers will certainly go on it. So good job to the residents on this one. On the 23rd, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we had 3 hit and run, and we call them counter reports. One at the block, the 700 block of Camille Ramon, one on Haskins Ranch Circle, and then the 600 block of Derbyshire Place. Counter reports. So a lot of times these reports are, if there's no leads or suspects, or maybe there's not a license plate left, or if there's not information that we can follow up on, what we do is we actually just provide you a simple form and you fill the information out. And that's why you'll see sometimes on one day where we'll document 3 different hit and runs, but they may have occurred several days in the past. And usually on this, these are, and I looked these up specifically, they usually tend to be, parked cars that were hit in some way and caused damage. So not good. We don't want that to happen, but that's the story on that. So I'm going to check the chat on this. Hi, Stephanie. Good to see you. So Gary says, unable to participate in the Fall Academy. When is the next one? So we offer them fall and spring. And here's what I'll say is a lot of people, when they look at the Academy, they think, okay, this is a 7-week commitment, Wednesday nights from 6 to 9, 2 Saturdays, and I'm going to be gone for a week or 2 in the middle, right? That's okay. And so what we'd encourage you to do is reach out to us, let us know what days you might not be available, and we'll see if we can't work around it. And what we've done in the past is, let's say if you missed day 4 of the Fall Academy, we'll just bring you back for day 4 of the spring, should you want to attend that day. And that's not a big deal, but we do want to be as accommodating as we can, because we know that this is a program that's designed for you, the people that live and work in this community, and it's something that we would like people to participate in. So, Gary, we do offer them fall and spring, like clockwork. You'll see April, May, we'll have another one, and then we're having one in a couple weeks. So that tends to be the same times of year. All right, so I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on. We're going to start a series on that FEMA guide. So that all hazards guide that I'm always pitching. And I thought today would be a good one. Power outage might be a good one, but I think we're going to run over and we will end up doing extreme heat here. So how are you to be prepared for extreme heat? We know we've got a really, really wicked weather weekend coming ahead of us, a lot of heat. And if you look at it, extreme heat often results in the highest number of deaths of any weather-related event. And that was kind of shocking to me, because I thought certainly like hurricanes and floods and things like that would take more, but heat-related illnesses tend to go underreported as far as how they are related to weather. And so it's important, 1, make sure you're taking care of yourself. 2, make sure you're looking out for those that may be severely affected when the heat really goes up. And so let's go, and I don't have the guide in front of me, but if you remember, the guide is broken up into 3 sections. It's how to prepare now, what to do during an event, and then what to do after, or how to mitigate the harm that's caused by an event. So we're going to cover probably 8 or 9 weeks worth, and we're going to start and kick it off with our extreme heat. So if you're under an extreme heat warning, which we are going to see over this weekend, try to be prepared ahead of time and know where those locations are that you can get air conditioning, avoid strenuous activities, watch for heat-related illness, and I'll cover some details on that in another slide. Wear light clothing, and you might even consider wearing clothing that covers all the skin to avoid the sunburn and those sort of issues. Check on your family members and neighbors, drink lots of fluids, and watch for the heat cramps. And I've got an interesting story about that I'll cover here in a minute. And certainly the pets, the kids in cars, I mean, that is extremely dangerous, even on a warm day, let alone a hot day. And it could very well be criminal as well. If you leave an animal in a car, that could be cruelty to animals, and certainly it's child abuse if you leave a young child in a car in those kind of conditions. All right, so what can we do to prepare now? Identify the locations where you can go to get cool. And here's what I'll ask all of you to do. Jump in the chat right now and give up your tips. Like, if you have, aside from your home, Where would you go when the temperatures really get hot? I know personally, I tend to maybe head down to Costco, and that's when I tend to do my shopping because it's always nice and cool in there. I know a lot of people that do the shopping. We've got our senior center that is open during business hours. So there are places that you can go. I'm curious, what do all of you do and where do all of you go when the heat gets cranking? So if you can throw that in the chat, that would be great. But if we're talking about preparation, and this is maybe not something you're going to do in the next couple of days in preparation of this weekend, but if we're looking at a long-term plan and we're doing upgrades and modifications to our home, what can we do to better survive these events as they get to be more common? So cover up your windows with drapes and shades. So really consider having multiple layers of that insulation from the windows that really are a leaky spot for most homes. Make sure that the weather stripping around your doors and windows is solid. I'll be honest, mine, up until about 2 years ago, you could actually see underneath my garage door from my garage to my home. It was really bad. And that just has a negative effect on your ability to retain energy in your house. Consider the use of window films. So think about this. These are going to be, they could be reflective window films. They could just be UV reducing. There are a lot of films that you can put on windows that will reduce the energy transfer, as well as just upgrading your windows themselves and making sure that they're of good quality, that they're going to reduce the, I'm liking the notes in the chat here. I'm seeing some vacation ideas coming up too. Okay, so add insulation to your home. And one of the things that tends to go overlooked is an attic fan to regulate the attic temperature. This would be a fan that's actually on your roof line, that when the attic, so that's the area above the living area, when, that's not air conditioned, it's usually not insulated. When that reaches a certain temperature, a fan will kick on and it will exhaust all of that air into or out of your house. And that way, if that's reduced, then it should reduce the load on your home as well. So there are some things you can do prior to make this even better. So what do you do during? Again, we covered this before, but never ever leave a child, an adult, or an animal inside a vehicle on a warm day. And then find those places with air conditioning, libraries, shopping malls, community centers. And I'm actually going to check on the chat because it looks like we're getting some good ones here. Jackie says she's heading to the coast. Laurel says movie theater. Laurel, I have to be honest, I thought you had tickets to Hawaii or something. I thought that was going to be, when I was thinking about this question, I really thought that was going to be the answer. Yuri says grocery stores. Eric says, I think most people prepare for hurricanes. People don't seem to prepare for 105-degree weather and a PG&E outage. Hope the DPD patrol cars have good AC. Watching kids for signs of exhaustion can be tough too. They can turn very fast from healthy to lethargic. So Eric, that's a good point. That kind of prompts me to tell a quick story. So one of the things I like to do is I like to coach kids doing cross country. And we've had some really hot days, and Monday was no exception. And as we're pushing these kids, it's really important for us as the adults to really check in on them, make sure that they've got their water and that they're sipping it and drinking it constantly, making sure that they come prepared to practice and that they're hydrated. But sometimes we can forget and take for granted that the kids may not be doing what they should to stave off being a victim of some of these heat illnesses. All right, back to some of the good places. We got Dan says the coast as well, so that's good. So we've got a couple going to the coast. Debbie is going to go read some books in the library. That's perfect. And Yuri says he's going to the pool. So Yuri, here's the trick with that, because I will say that one of my favorite places to go when the heat gets turned up is actually to go to the lake. And so we like to go out on the lake, maybe the Delta. The issue with that is you can be fooled because you're in the water and you're doing fine, and then all of a sudden you've got this wicked sunburn, and that is one of the heat illnesses that we do want to look for and make sure that we're being safe. So even when we're out at the pool, for my kids, sometimes I even put them in swim shirts, things that have a thicker UV rating, because we tell them to put the sunscreen on all the time, and that doesn't always work. So make sure that you're not fooled by the cool water. So Gary says, stay hydrated, start hydrating well prior to the event, not just the day of. So that's good. And that's actually good race advice. I think when you do an endurance style race, they'll say start about 3 days in advance. So that's how important it is to get the hydration into the cells, because once you're behind on it, it's really, really tough to catch up. All right. So if you are outside, and this kind of goes to what Yuri was talking about being in the pool, if you're outside, find some shade. Do the best you can to find some shade. Wear a hat, maybe one that protects the head, face, and neck. Wear loose, lightweight clothing. And we talked about drinking plenty of water. Avoid high energy activities. This isn't to say don't do any activities, but just really check in with yourself. Normally, if you're doing your 10-mile runs, you might want to cut that one back. Maybe choose to do it way early in the morning, but just alter your lifestyle a little bit to make sure that you're not going to suffer some of these heat-related illnesses. And then always make sure that we're checking in with family members and neighbors and whatnot. So let's talk about some of the signs, because I think these can go ignored. And I will tell you one story at the end of going over these signs that I hope drives this point home. So first off, heat cramps. Heat cramps, you know, some of the signs that you'll see are the muscle pains and the spasms. And sometimes you know, if you've ever worked out and got dehydrated, sometimes your back will lock up, or you just get that tightness. If you're out in the sun and you're sweating a lot and you're doing that, it could be a sign that you're getting those heat cramps. So really look for them. You need to take immediate action on that. Go to a cooler location, remove any clothing. Really think about drinking like a sports drink, water. And if you have any issues with how you hydrate, you might want to consult your doctor ahead of time and say, okay, look, if I start to suffer from a heat-related illness, what is the best thing for me to take? And I'm saying that because some people may be on low-sodium diets, or diets that might be restrictive in what they should take in. And so it's good to know ahead of time that if I have to hyperhydrate, what am I supposed to do? And it might just be a trip to the doctor and get an IV. So really have an idea of what it is that you need to do if you start getting behind the curve. So heat exhaustion. So this is heavy sweating, paleness, muscle cramps, tiredness, weakness, dizziness, headache, nausea, vomiting, and fainting. Again, just go to some place that's cool, looser clothing, take sips of sports drinks. And if you feel you need medical help, get medical help. And certainly if symptoms don't get better, make sure you go. Heat stroke, this is where you're going to start to notice that your body temperature is up quite a bit. If you can take your temperature, that's what you want to do, because you really want to make sure that you're not suffering from a heat stroke. And if you get to this point, or you notice a family member that's at that point, then if you've got the heat illness signs plus the fever, you really want to start going to the doctor and call 911. Okay, so as far as the story, so I thought I would do something really crazy one day, and I was going to ride my bike from Auburn, California to Danville. And so the trip I was going to do was going to be about 150 miles, and I was supposed to start at about 8 in the morning. For whatever reason, I didn't actually start till noon. And so that meant I was going through like Sacramento, Dixon, Davis, those areas at a pretty, 3, 4 in the afternoon. It was a super hot day. It ended up being well into the 90s, like almost into the 100s. So it was very, very hot. I was starting to I went through heat illness pretty quick. The sweating, the redness, I was very hot, couldn't cool down. And then I started getting these wicked cramps in my legs. And it was to the point where I couldn't move. And what I didn't realize was I wasn't doing a good self-assessment. And this is what we're trying to encourage with this, is do self-assessments. Predict that this is going to happen. And so what I needed to do was actually do a self-assessment and say, okay, are you okay? Actually get off the bike every once in a while, check in and see if I'm okay. By the time I got to Vacaville, which is about the 100-mile mark, I was like, I'm in some really bad shape. So I stopped by the store to get some Gatorade. When I went to talk to the person behind the counter, I didn't realize that my jaw was even like clenched up really bad. And so that's when I knew I needed some help. So I called my wife and I said, you got to come get me, because I'm not going to make the rest of this ride. So that was the first moment I did a self-check and said, okay, something's wrong. And basically, without knowing it, I followed the advice that was in this checklist. I began to hydrate with Gatorade and water, and I started taking on some food with sugars in it. And within about 30 to 40 minutes, I started feeling amazingly better. And so I went to a cool place, started to hydrate, and felt a lot better. But I should have been listening to what my body was trying to tell me much earlier than that. All right, so that's all I have for that. I'm going to check on the chat here, see if there's anything else. Pedialyte works great, Gary. I'll tell you right now, I've got little packets of Pedialyte sitting in my drawer here, and I don't hesitate to go to those if I want to replenish with fluid. So Eric Parker says, drink plenty of fluid leaves a lot to interpretation. Labor Day case of beer may not be as good as a bottle of water. Very good. What you take in to your body matters. And so I guess the drink plenty of fluid, we should say water and things that promote healthy hydration. So great job, Eric. I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on. We have had several times where we've had power outages in town now, and we're going to cover more broadly what to do in a power outage, but I do want to cover the stoplight issue. The way the stoplights are in town, our transportation manager, Andy Dillard, and his team at our major intersections, what they do is in those big cabinets where the controllers are, there's actually battery backup in there. And to do it as efficiently as possible, when the power goes down, the battery is supposed to kick on and it'll turn them to four-way flashing. And that means instead of going through red, yellow, and green, it is just going to be red flashing lights. So with a red flashing light, the expectation is that you stop and you treat it just like a stop sign, and you proceed when it is your turn and safe to do so. Here's some of the trouble with that is when you're treating an intersection like a four-way stop, pedestrians often get lost in the mix. And so what I'm asking drivers to do is really look for those pedestrians in the crosswalk, because if you come to that and you stop and you yield to the vehicle traffic and then you go, but there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, you are now in violation of failing to yield to a pedestrian in the crosswalk. And so we want to be careful of that. And I know that's the technical law, but really what we don't want is we just don't want someone getting hit in the crosswalk. Now, those batteries only last for so long, and sometimes they can even fail on initial power surge. So sometimes you'll actually come across an intersection and it's just completely dark, right? We've had that when our signal controller was hit a few weeks back. The whole intersection at Camino Sahara and Sycamore was dark. And when you come to an intersection and it's completely dark, the expectation is you treat it like a four-way stop. Okay. What we often see is we see one person stop and another person behind them. And as the first car goes, the second car goes right past with them. And then, of course, we also see cars that blow right through it. We often get criticized and people say, well, why don't you just have a cop out there directing traffic? That sounds like a good idea, but if you start having 2 and 3 intersections go down, what we do is we quickly deplete all of our resources. We would have no officers left. So if you called 911, we would have no one to respond out. And so we have to work with the expectation that people are going to follow the rules of the road. If it's a major delay, I talked to our transportation manager about it. If there's a major delay in getting a stoplight back up, then we'll actually put out like stop signs and we'll put out some additional control features. But we really don't have the resources to have an officer just sitting out there. And so if you can, please let your friends and neighbors know what the rules are when they come to a stoplight that's either flashing or that's completely dark. And if you're a pedestrian, please use care and caution. Realize that it's an unusual thing and it disrupts drivers, and it's a lot more hazardous than when the signal is controlled or the intersection is controlled by all those signals. All right, so that is the final thought. I'm looking, I do not see anything else in the chat. So let me remind you, we do have our community warning system. We'd like you to sign up for that. That's how you get information about significant events that are taking place. You can also download our wildfire preparedness and evacuation guide. If you'd like to contribute to local roadway safety, there's a link in the description where you can update and tell us what you would like to see as far as improved roadway safety in town. And then in 2 weeks' time, so on September 17th, the Danville Police Department's Citizens Academy is going to start. There is a link in the description. Just go down there. You can download the application, send it in, and we will get you enrolled into the next academy. We still have some slots in, and it will be fun. So come join us and have a good time. Danville, that's it. We're 10:10, which means we're off duty, but we're always 10:8 and in service to all of you. Have a good day.